Hi, everyone. Lori here. My channel is Carnivore Cheer, and I'm really glad to see you all. Thank you for stopping in. And today I'm going to talk about um, some tips for people who are kind of exploring whether they should pursue the carnivore diet or not. And I decided to do this particular video because I've had the pleasure of being interviewed by a few people, and this question has come up uh, frequently. So I thought it might be good to just kind of compile what my typical responses were and see if I could come up with a general set of tips. So I came up with 10 tips that I hope will be helpful to people. Feel free to take what's useful to you and leave the rest. There are many other people who have offered some tips about, how to kind of feel out the ground with the carnivore diet. So I'm just adding my perspectives onto theirs. And, there's a lot of valuable information that I hope you can draw from it. So these are the tips that I have found helpful to me, and ways that I think people who want to explore this can kind of just gently feel out the ground and make an informed decision. So I want to thank all of you for joining me today. I also want to give a special thanks for my new subscribers. I appreciate all of my subscribers. Thank you very much. Now, as you're watching this video, if things resonate with you, please do click the like button because that helps increase exposure to my videos. So now let's move on to 10 tips for exploring the possibility of a carnivore diet. Now, before I start, I just want you to know this is based on my own personal experience, things I've learned through my own research. So I am not a trained nutritionist. I have no medical certifications or qualifications. So please don't construe any of this as medical advice. It's just information that I want to share based on what I think is pretty good research. So just keep that in mind as we move along. So let's go to our 10 tips. Tip number 1, give yourself credit for being willing to make this exploration. Now that might sound, not very relevant, but believe me, it is, because it shows that you're looking into different aspects of your own health. And that is really, really important. It's highly relevant. So no matter where this journey takes you, even if you decide carnivore is not for you, give yourself credit for exploring, because that's what a lot of people are not willing to do. But if you're willing to do it, huzzah to you. Tip number 2, once you've decided to explore and look into the carnivore diet, start to ask yourself, why? Why did I even want to look into this at all? Because there could be a number of reasons why. For example, are you kind of thinking that maybe this is the point in my life where I need to think about my health and improving my health or maintaining my good health? So, a lot of people reach a point where they feel like they might need to make some course corrections in their way of eating. Or did you have a health scare recently? For example, did you have a breast biopsy and it turned out fine, but it was very frightening? Or did you have a colonoscopy and you were convinced you had colon cancer, but it turned out you didn't have any polyps, your colon was fine, but still it was, kind of left you breathless. So that might prompt you to think about, well, maybe I ought to just take a look at my way of eating. Did you have a bout of sickness? Like, was this a rough winter as far as having a cold or a flu, or did you have a bout of COVID or something like that? Just something that kind of alerted you to the fact that maybe I need to look at, strengthening my immune system, or maybe pursuing some types of foods that might help me to resist viruses and infections, things like that. So that might be something. Or have you lost a loved one or a friend to a very tragic illness like heart disease or cancer? That often prompts people to wonder, could nutrition have had something to do with this tragic loss in my life? Or have you just heard people talk casually about Well, I started eating more meat and, less sugar, less, number of carbohydrates, and I'm feeling a lot better. So that might be kind of intriguing. So these are all wise, and I would take note of them. As a matter of fact, you may want to, as you start your exploration, to, have something to write it all down with and kind of keep track of where you are, whether it be just a small spiral notebook or some index cards, or I don't know if you want to do it on your computer or anything, because the more you explore, if you feel interest, you see interesting comments, or you find some videos that are interesting and you want to keep a written record of those, this is a good way to do it. I like to use index cards, and I have different colored pens to emphasize different things. So in fact, every one of the videos that I have produced started somewhere on an index card. So yeah, so keep a journal in whatever way works for you. Tip number 3, think about what your understanding of carnivore diet means. Now, to tell the truth, I have always loved meat, but I had not heard a term called carnivore diet up until a couple of years ago. And as it turns out, I've probably been a carnivore since I was born. I just didn't know it. I just didn't know there was a word for it. So think about what your current understanding is, because there's a lot of terminology. There's low carb, there's paleo diet, there's Mediterranean, there's keto, there's ketovore, and there are all sorts of ways to describe how people eat. And for many people, myself included, I have made a transition, from a very high carb, high sugar, destructive diet to a more low carb diet, and then an even lower carb diet with more meat, which is often described as a ketogenic way of eating. And then there is ketovore, in which meat takes an even more prominent role. And then there is carnivore, where meat is the star of the show, where your diet is principally meat, and little to no carbohydrate. And meat includes, beef, steak, bison meat, poultry. You can eat chicken or turkey on carnivore, seafood, fish. So it's animal based. So it's not just beef, but some people do restrict themselves strictly to beef. And that is often described as the lion diet. And that works very well for some people, but you don't have to, not everybody who eats carnivore has to go to the lion diet. So consider the lion diet kind of a subset of carnivore. But carnivore is kind of the general term for a principally animal-based diet. And that is where I am right now. And that is something that works very well for me right now. So just think about what that all means to you. It may turn out that maybe ketovore is better for you, or you think it is, or maybe a combination of the Mediterranean diet with some carnivore tendencies thrown in. So you're gonna kind of explore a lot of that, and you might find that carnivore is just where you want to be and need to be. So for me, it was easy because I've always loved meat. Tip number 4, share your plan to explore carnivore at your discretion. Now, especially, among your friends and family and coworkers, because you own this. This is your decision and yours alone. And you can tell people to the extent that you feel comfortable doing so, or you don't have to tell anybody. That is your decision. Sometimes I didn't really tell anybody that I was kind of starting to jump into carnivore, making that transition, because I was afraid, as a lot of us are, that, with all the miseducation about what it means to eat meat, people say, oh, you're going to have a heart attack, or, oh, that's bad for you, or that's way too much saturated fat. And I just didn't want to deal with any of that. I needed to explore on my own. Now, the one exception to this is that if there is any reason that you're exploring carnivore based on not feeling well. If you're having some unusual pains that you've never had, or blood is showing up where it's not supposed to, that is not something you want to hide from your doctor. So always make sure that you get anything checked out that is unusual, that might have a long-term effect on your health. So please don't hide don't be afraid to ask your doctor about any of those unusual symptoms, because they may be something that's very easily treatable, or they may be something that requires a little more extensive treatment. So just keep that in mind. But do feel that you have a right to protect your privacy in terms of who you tell among your friends, coworkers, or family. Tip number 5, and this is going to be a little tough. It was tough for me, but I toughed it out, and I'm not nearly as afraid of it anymore. But be prepared and brace yourself to hear a ton of anti-meat and anti-fat messaging. It is everywhere. It's all over the media. People are very, very poorly informed, unfortunately, and so was I. When I first started this, I bought into lots and lots of bad messaging about, well, you can't consume too many calories. Saturated fat will clog your arteries and it'll give you a heart attack or a stroke, and it's going to kill you. You're going to hear all kinds of stuff like that. And research will be your friend. You will find it most helpful if you just, you can listen to these things politely, but put them aside and listen for overgeneralizations, because there are tons of those too. For example, people say, oh, butter, don't eat butter. It's so bad for you. Well, what does that mean? What does bad for you mean? And so you'll hear a lot of references to, especially among casual conversation, about, oh, red meat rots in your colon. What does rots mean? And in your colon, what does that mean? That there's no science there at all. So you have to take those types of informal language with a grain of salt. And you'll hear things like, oh, if you put too much butter on your food, it's going to clog up your arteries. And we're finding out a lot about what actually causes plaques in your arteries that possibly lead to heart attacks. So it's not as simple as somebody just saying, butter clogs your arteries, saturated fat clogs your arteries. It's far more complex than that. And as it turns out, butter is wholesome, natural food with lots of nutrients in it. So, you're going to find that you might have been afraid of some foods that are actually very, very good for you, as I have found out myself. So, and also be suspicious of a lot of studies you're going to hear about. Well, there's an association between eating high amounts of saturated fat and this or that horrifying health condition. Now, association and risk, those are not cause and effect. It doesn't mean that one thing causes the other thing, that eating one thing causes this or that disease. Association and risk cannot be quantified. That is not reliable data to work with. So you have to, take all of that with a grain of salt, and don't hesitate. And there will be a lot of nonsense, and you'll probably be able to filter that out pretty easily. Especially when you hear, very informal references like, this or that is going to tear up your gut or whatever like that. That's not scientific, and it's probably not true either. You're going to hear references to things like, well, that's fattening. That kind of food is fattening. What's fattening? What is it? Because I have found, number one, that term is just totally confusing. And to me, it doesn't even make any sense anymore. And fattening, people say like, I keep referring to butter again, but butter is fattening, or peanut butter is fattening. Well, I had to sit there and think about that. I'm 5'3" and I weigh just under 100 pounds. Now, I've been eating lots and lots of butter for the last 2 years. So why don't I weigh 100, or why don't I weigh 200 pounds if all this butter is fattening? So, you're going to learn about some of these things. You're going to learn about good fat and bad fat. And there is fat that is not good for you, but there is a lot of fat that is good for you and good for your body. And you're going to learn that as you go along and do your research. So tip number 6, take some time to just take some inventory about how you feel about meat, red meat, white meat, anything. Think back on, are there meats? Have you always loved meat? I mean, I have always loved meat ever since I was a tot. So this is a very, very clear indicator that carnivore was a good direction for me to go. But maybe there are some meats that just never curried your fancy. Maybe you're not a big fan of steak, or maybe you love ground beef, but there are other things that you don't like, or maybe you don't like organ meats, or maybe you prefer burgers over chicken, or chicken over burgers. But so think about those things, that kind of take a little meat inventory, so to speak, because that will help you to kind of discover what role meat needs to take for you in terms of what you feel is best for your health. Now, for me, as a full-blown carnivore, meat is the star of the show. Meat is center stage. I eat meat pretty much. That's it. And that means meat and poultry and fish. I eat all of those. Now, for poultry, for example, I do eat chicken breast, but I always try to eat the fattier part of the chicken too. For example, the thigh, the leg, where the fattier meat is, because the fat is that's something good. It's not bad. Tip number 7, listen to testimonials from fellow carnivores who have really benefited from this way of eating. There are so many carnivores on YouTube now, and there's really a very strong community that is building and getting stronger every day. And people have talked about how they have more energy. They have with their doctors, they have stepped off of medications. They just feel better. They have far more mental clarity. There are many, many testimonials. Now, every human body is different. So some people may not realize a lot of benefits. It may take more time for some people. For me, for example, I'm celebrating my carniversary on May 27th of this year. Now, that's 2 years as a carnivore, as opposed to nearly 5 decades of a train wreck diet centered on carbs and sugar. So even though I ate meat all that time, the carbs and sugar grabbed center stage, hijacked my health, and nearly took my life. So, there is really something to this. And sometimes you will hear some counter arguments. Well, vegans say that they have benefited from, not eating meat. And it's possible that some of them have. And probably a good reason for that is that they might have eliminated a lot of very highly processed foods, and that helps anybody, vegan or non-vegan. But, there are some issues with veganism as well. Now, veganism would never have ever worked for me because I never liked vegetables, and I knew that ever since I was a tiny, tiny tot. So the more you can kind of know about your eating patterns over your entire life, that will be helpful to you too. And I believe really that carnivore has benefits both in terms of weight loss, your physical health, and your mental health. And the body of research is growing all the time. So I feel very encouraged about it. Tip number 8, start when you think you're ready. If you need to keep, researching, if you still have questions or you still have doubts, take the time you need to feel comfortable when you're ready to dive in. And, you don't have to make this lifelong commitment. So if you feel like maybe I'll give it 90 days or 60 days, that's fine. Or there may be a life circumstance that came up that you didn't expect that may not be a good time to actually jump into a carnivore diet. Maybe, there's going to be a major event in your family, like a wedding coming up, or maybe, you had a loss of a loved one and you need to grieve for that for a while. So, sometimes unexpected circumstances come up, and even if you might be ready to start carnivore, you might have to put it off for a little while, and that's fine, but make sure that the time is appropriate for what you think it is. You don't have to feel rushed. You don't have to make a commitment. You don't have to worry about rules or, this isn't allowed on carnivore, that isn't allowed on carnivore. It doesn't work that way. And there are some people who are very enthusiastic and they tend to want to set up rules or whatever, but don't worry about that. Right now you're exploring, you're kind of kicking the tires. And so you just want to learn, you want to research and you want to learn. And once you start carnivore, if you make that decision, that learning will continue. I mean, in the 2 years that I have been on this diet, I have learned a great deal. I've had to make some course corrections. For example, I kind of thought foolishly, and looking back now, that, well, if I get some sugar cravings, I'll just get some 0 sugar diet soda and that'll tide me over. Bad decision, because the sweet taste is still there. And it was almost as if I still had the sugar craving, but I was trying to think of ways that I could kind of work around it. But it didn't work because I kept wanting to drink more and more diet soda. And that wasn't making any sense to me. Plus, diet soda is just filled with chemicals. It's just bad news. So I had to ditch diet soda, and I have no regrets about that. So, you're going to make some course corrections. You're going to try things, they don't work, you try something else, and that's okay, because every single carnivore, every single person who has adopted this way of eating has tripped and fallen and made mistakes. There's no getting around it. We're human beings, and there is no such thing as an imperfect human being. As long as human beings walk the earth, there will be imperfection. So you don't have to beat yourself up. In fact, sometimes I think, don't beat yourself up, meet yourself up. So, once you decide to start carnivore, don't worry about, trying to do everything perfectly right from the start. Tip number 9, if you're still confused, even after you've decided, I think I'm going to go with this way of eating, don't hesitate to reach out to the growing carnivore community, because there are so many people that have felt the same confusion you have, same confusion I have, and there are tons and tons and tons of YouTube channels that can be very helpful. And another thing is, there are a number of doctors and nutritional experts that can be very, very helpful. For example, the doctor who really helped me get a kickstart in carnivore is Dr. Ken Berry. Now, you might have already heard of Dr. Berry, but he is the first person that I would go to on YouTube. He has more than 3 million subscriptions now. And he is a family physician, born and raised in Tennessee. That's where he got that's where he went to medical school. And, he's been through a lot of what a lot of us have been through, gaining weight, just having some health issues. And now he is very healthy. He and his wife, and they're raising their two young children to be meat eaters, and that's really great. But Dr. Berry has posted tons of videos on so many different topics, and he has a wonderful speaking style, very clear, very easy to understand, laced with just enough fun humor to make it really enjoyable and educational at the same time. So, and he grounds all of his information that he shares on solid research. He will not give you something that he has not researched himself. And he posts very valuable links to different studies, different very good studies, true scientific studies. And you can look at those in his show notes and learn a lot. So do check out Dr. Ken Berry. You'll be glad you did. And it's, even if you decide not to continue with carnivore, it is very educational. There's another carnivore doctor, Dr. Shawn, Shawn Baker, and he wrote a book called The Carnivore Diet. Now, Dr. Baker used to practice orthopedic surgery, but he is really devoting his time to, really supporting the carnivore community. He's very, very well informed. So Dr. Shawn Baker. Dr. Anthony Chaffee, Chaffee. He is an American doctor who is now practicing in Australia. And he is a very strong advocate of the carnivore diet. Once again, very well informed, bases all of his advice on solid research. I would probably call him, he's probably a Lion Diet participant most of the time because he's pretty much all beef. But his videos are excellent. He's very, very well informed, and he has reached out to other carnivores and has been very, very helpful to them. Another doctor I would love to have you check out is Dr. Tony Hampton. Now, Dr. Hampton is based out of Chicago, where he practices, and he has worked with people with diabetes, many, many people with diabetes, and his interest is helping everybody to be metabolically healthy. And he does it with what I call informed compassion, because he really understands, how the body works in terms of metabolic health. And he has helped many, many patients to either reduce or get off diabetic medications. And it's amazing the compassion that he uses to treat his patients. I wish we had a million more Dr. Hamptons in this world. It was my honor and pleasure to be interviewed by Dr. Hampton, and we talked about emotional eating. And, it was a special honor to talk to him because I know that he understands the role of really understanding and listening to people as they make their journey to better health. So Dr. Tony Hampton, do check him out. For women especially, but for anybody in general, but for women especially, Dr. Kiltz, I'm sorry, Kiltz. Now, Dr. Kiltz specializes in obstetrics and gynecology, and he does a lot of work with women to help them have healthy babies. And, he is a passionate carnivore, and he is a wonderful presenter. He is extremely compassionate, and he loves life, and you can tell. So check out Dr. Kiltz, Kiltz. I think you'll be glad you did. So tip number 10 is, when you're ready to dig in, you're probably wondering, well, where do I start? Do I, cut this first or add that first or whatever? Well, first of all, always, make sure that you're eating meat at some point. But if you just need some place to start, I would start here. Ditch the sugar. Sugar is bad news. The more we hear about sugar, the worse it gets. Sugar is not a nutrient that we need. And if you can eliminate sugar from your diet, that will help lay a very good groundwork for success, no matter what your eating pattern eventually takes. So I know that sugar is a tough one to give up, because before I went carnivore, I was eating tons of sugar. I could, if I entered a chocolate chip cookie eating contest with 5 other contestants, I would leave them all eating red dust. I could beat them all, because you put a plate of delicious chocolate chip cookies in front of me, game over. Down they go, all gone, just like that. And, I loved sweet things. And so giving up sugar was just the toughest thing I ever did. But it was the best thing I ever did, because I don't have that destructive, addictive element to deal with anymore. And we know now that sugar is a highly addictive substance. It really is. And, it's a tragedy to me that sugar is just everywhere. And it's tough, because sugar is part of our culture. We reward, if you do, we tell kids, if you do this or that, you get an extra candy bar. Children's birthday parties, what's the star of the show? Birthday cake. So, we center a lot of things, especially for children, around sugar, so they get used to sugar. Now it's just before Easter as I'm recording this video, and this is a tough time, because when I was at the grocery store, they had all the Easter candy out, and before I gave up sugar, my big thing for Easter was Reese's peanut butter eggs. But I wouldn't just buy one little Reese's peanut butter egg. I would buy 2 packs of 6 eggs and just eat them all up, because I couldn't eat just one peanut butter egg. I had to eat all 6 of the package. And of course, that is completely off the table for me now. So, sometimes I think back on that and how tragic it was for me. And I am grateful that I don't have that dogging my life anymore. So think about sugar. If you want to find out more about the destructive effects of sugar, look up Dr. Robert Lustig, Lustig, because he worked as a pediatric endocrinologist for many, many years. He had a practice with, children and teenagers, and he would have kids as young as age 10 come into his office, and they had fatty liver and they had high blood sugar. I mean, these are just kids. And as it turned out, these kids had been just eating sugar all the time, soda, candy bars, cookies, all kinds of high carbon, high sugar snacks that were actually starting to destroy their health at a very young age. And that is very sad. So Dr. Robert Lustig is a good person. In fact, he was one person that kind of helped me get religion about how dangerous sugar was. So I would definitely check out a video, and I will actually put some of this information in the show notes for this video. So anyway, those are the 10 tips that I am offering. As I mentioned, please feel free to take what's useful for you and leave the rest, and leave any notes in the comments if you have any other perspectives or have any questions or anything else. And once again, I want to thank you for watching. It's always a pleasure to share information and to help other people in their journey to good health. And please be sure to like and subscribe. And thank you once again. Listen up, lift up, and cheer up. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye for now.